Welcome back. We finished the last installment talking about how sometimes the system can generate lists of highly compatible jobs that don't make sense when you look at them the first time. And I referred to one of the very first events where we introduced this system to one of the groups of veterans that we've been working with for some time, and it happened to be a room full of Marines, all of whom had been having some difficulty reintegrating into the civilian world the conventional way, following all the usual advice about preparing your resume, finding ways to, tools that'll help you translate your military skills into civilian skills so that a civilian recruiter might understand you. None of those approaches that they'd been taught were really giving them any traction at all. And there's a bunch of reasons that, again, we'll come to in another session. But what happened in this particular session is we handed out the same career planning reports that are available to you in your personality section of Jobtimize. It's down at the bottom of the page. There's a link where you can download your career planner. And because it's generating the list of high compatibility jobs out of the entire library of almost 1,300 positions, it's bound to have a wide assortment of high compatibility jobs, and some that look really, really odd side by side. And this was where I fell into the trap as I was doing this for the very first time, because one of the Marines in the room had as his highest compatibility jobs, sort of in the top 10 or 15, he had Chief Operating Officer and Professional Dancer. And it obviously, as you can imagine, took him a little bit sideways, and he wasn't terribly pleased and made it known, and the rest of the room wasn't terribly pleased. And the conversation sort of, I won't say it turned hostile, but it certainly turned uncomfortable very quickly, because the question was, how is it possible, if this thing works the way you say it does, that you could have COO and Professional Dancer on the same list side by side? Which gave me pause for thought. But as you peel it back, it created a really good conversation in the room, because the answer obviously is, so what is it about those two seemingly so different jobs that could have them be on the same list? They're different in terms of income, in terms of education, in terms of how the person spends their time, in terms of just about anything you can imagine. And yet, as you start to look at the essential requirements of the job itself, there are lots of things that professional dancer and COO have in common. They both require lots of preparation and practice. It's about perfecting the process. It's about making sure that you've ironed out every possible kink and making it as efficient and reliable as possible over and over and over again. It's about making sure that every time you're starting the process, you're setting yourself up for flawless execution every time, because it's always a performance, whether you're running a manufacturing operation or whether you're part of a dance troupe. You've got to do your part perfectly every time. And so as we started to explain that into the room, it reduced the tension a little bit, but it also created a really good lesson for me, since it was my first time facilitating that conversation, and it's a lesson that I'd like to share with you. Don't get hooked up on the titles themselves that show up on your list. They act as some guidance for you, but I think more importantly, at this early stage, as you're starting to work your way into Jobtimize, use it as a guidepost. And if you see something odd, sort of step back and say, all right, what is it about the reality of that job? What is it about the way somebody in that role would be spending their time that makes it an especially good fit for me? And that's going to be valuable for a couple of reasons. Not because we're trying to convince you to consider that job, absolutely not, but because it's going to equip you to think differently about other kinds of roles that might be on the list, or other roles that you hear about. The shift, if you like, the starting point for you is to become less fixated on the job title and the position description, and to start thinking more through the lens of, how would a person in this job be spending their time? What are the kinds of things that they'd be responsible for? And how does this mesh with who I am deep down inside as a personality? And how can I bring value? How can I contribute effectively and productively in a role that requires this of someone in it? And you'll find that that's going to shift the way you think about opportunity, but it's also dramatically going to shift the conversations that you're having with people, whether they're in HR or whether it's the hiring manager, about why you're especially compatible for the job they've got posted. More on that later.